Hello, my name is Samantha Herring, and I did this project also with Kristen Stanley and Whitney Olson, and we had the Goss versus Lopez case. So the full name of this case is Goss et al. Versus Lopez et al. So the court of jurisdiction and date decided on this case. It was heard in the U.S. Supreme Court as an appeal from U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Ohio, and it was decided on January 22nd, 1975. So the facts in this case are 10 students in Columbus, Ohio were given suspension of 10 days or less for misconduct without notice or a hearing. The plaintiffs claimed that the suspensions were unconstitutional because they violated the students' right to an education and were in disregard of the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. Can the right to an education be withdrawn due to misconduct without fair procedures to determine if misconduct occurred? Can record of misconduct that could damage reputation be made without due process to determine occurrence? And is a 10-day suspension so insubstantial to property or liberty interests that it may be imposed without regard to due process? And those are the issues. Holding. Students facing temporary suspensions from a public school have property and liberty interests that qualify for protection under the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. The court ruled in favor of the students, finding that due process requires notice and hearing preceding removal or as soon as possible. Reasoning. Ohio state law provides a free education for all children. Therefore, these students had been unconstitutionally denied this right by being suspended without the due process of a hearing prior to or within a reasonable time after. Education and reputation are property rights and liberty rights that are protected under the Constitution and by the Due Process Clause. Order of judgment. The administrators were required to remove all references to suspension from the student's record. Administration must provide notification with reasons for suspension within 24 hours, as well as providing a process for appealing suspension. Effect. Goss versus Lopez applies to all students, including special education students. States have used Goss versus Lopez to create procedures through legislation or regulations for short-term and long-term disciplinary school removal. As I was researching this case and filling out the PowerPoint, I was kind of thinking about, so I work at a middle school and we do like an in-school suspension situation where we actually pipe in their instruction to them in a separate contained room. And I imagine that is partially because of this case, because the students aren't technically out of school. They're still receiving a free and appropriate education at that point. And they're receiving, if it's a SPED student, they're still receiving all of the services that they would if they were in the normal classroom. And so I just kept thinking about that, and that was really interesting to me how this case could have affected why we do that. So that was really cool.